Hey friends and foes, welcome to Brushwork Podcast. My name is Stephanie Scott. Today I'm going to teach you how to pack for an art residency. In a week, I get to go to the heart of France for an art residency for a whole month. And I thought to myself, you know what? It would be a very interesting thing to record how I'm going to be packing my suitcase for all of my clothing in the middle of winter. It's November right now. Plus all of my art supplies that I'll need in order to have an enjoyable experience in my time abroad. I'm from Seattle. I have to fly all the way to Paris and then take a train ride for 3 hours into the Champagne region, which is where my residency is. I have half a suitcase dedicated just for art supplies here. I'm using a Monos today. This is not sponsored. I don't do sponsored things yet. Maybe someday. The suitcase is their largest one, and I am desperate to get all of my art supplies in here and ready to go. For context, I am an oil painter, which means I'm going to need a huge list of items. Shall we get into it? This side of the suitcase, which I'm going to dedicate just for art supplies, is 5.5 inches by 17 inches by, I need a bigger ruler, by 24 inches. It is just big enough for a 16 by 20 inch painting if I wanted to bring that home. And bringing art supplies home after a trip is like a whole thing in itself. Let's assume now that this whole side is just for clothing and that whole side is just for art supplies. I'm doing clothing on this side because it zips up completely, and this one can be for more awkward items like all my podcasting equipment and also all of my art supplies. Oh my gosh, there's so many. Shall we get into the list? For my supplies, I've decided to bring these things. My palette, my brushes. I gotta wash those before I leave. Brush cleaner, palette knives, a phone stand, my ruler, a collection of pencils in its case, business cards, my sketchbook, a collection of pens, a couple of Sharpies, my artist colors, and finally, my canvas. Now, if you look at the screen here, you'll notice that my canvas is enormous and doesn't even fit into my suitcase, so we're going to have to break that down. I will be packing it and cutting it up later. What is important to think about when you are packing for an art residency or traveling anywhere with your art, especially if it's oil paint, is that taking it home when it's wet is going to be an issue. You know how when you're painting with oils, things dry really quickly in the summer? I'm talking about 5 days, sometimes less depending on the pigment. When it's winter, like it is now, things take a long time to dry. So I'm going to be cutting up my surfaces into smaller sections. That way, I can paint for the first 3 weeks of my trip on things that I'll be taking home and give them at least a week to dry. I'm hoping that other artists there are also oil painters and we can make a hot room of sorts where we just turn up the heat really high until it's time to leave and hope for the best. Shipping art back from an art residency is tricky and it takes a little bit of forethought to do it right. I have one friend who's an artist who has made such a cool little portfolio where it has like dividers and he can just put his paintings on the dividers. It has a hard shell, nothing happens to them, and they're amazing. He travels a lot with this art, and he's also a landscape painter. So his paintings are a lot smaller. I do big, giant oil paintings. They're enormous. All I want to do is paint things that are bigger than me. So that's a little bit of a problem. When I'm thinking about the kind of projects I'm going to bring with me for this residency, I'm thinking, okay, paintings with not a lot of texture, so they don't get crushed when I'm trying to ship it back home. Things that I could roll up potentially and put into my suitcase, and things that are smaller that also fit into the suitcase. There are a couple of other options that you could do for traveling with art. One of them is to have a, what is this called? Container like so, I believe. I have no idea what this is called. Somebody tell me in the comments, what is this thing called? It's round, it is a tube, and it has a handle. See? You go like this. I got this one from IKEA. They have a little twist top. They're hard cased, so nothing will happen. Usually I store prints in these when I'm taking them to the photographer, but, you could do anything you wanted with these. A container like that would be easy to bring with you on the plane. You just strap it over your shoulder, or it might fit into your suitcase. Mine does not, so I'm not going to be using that system. One thing that is important to think about when you're traveling with oil paintings is how you're going to approach your TSA agents when they're like, hey, what is this? You can't really travel with a tube and not check it. You have to check these. It's also really important to know that when you have oil paint in your suitcase, and this bad boy here, when you have oil paint in your suitcase, people are going to open up your suitcase and look at it. I like to have a little note that I write out, and it says, these are artist colors in vegetable oil. From here on out, when you are traveling with your artwork, you're never going to say the P word, paint. Never say that you are traveling with paint. You do not have paint, you have artist colors in vegetable oil. They are colors for artists. They are not paint. We do not say that word. There are no paints in your bag. There are artist colors, okay? If you say the P word, you're going to get flagged and they're going to search more thoroughly into your bags. It's annoying. You can get stopped for it. They might hold your bag. So don't say paint. They're artist colors. You got it? Another thing we need to talk about is what not to bring to your art residency. And that is two very important things. Actually, there's a couple important things, but these ones are most important. What I'm not going to bring with me is linseed oil and any kind of solvent, even gamblins, because they are combustible and you don't want to blow up your airplane. You're going to leave them at home. The truth is, I find that a lot of oil painting can be done without any solvents whatsoever. And if you really need them, the possibility of you being able to buy them in the country you're going to is pretty high. For my trip, I'm going to Paris a few days early. I will definitely stop at an art store and probably buy a little bottle of Gamvar, which is my favorite. However, if I can't find it, I don't need to get it. Depending on the kind of artwork you do, you don't need solvents at all for painting. Let's talk about brush cleaners for a second. I mentioned that I'm bringing this brush cleaner with me. This is the Masters brush cleaner. I love this. This little tin will last you at least 100 washes of your brushes. This little tin. When you open it up, mine has separated from the tin a bit because I've used some water with it. It's this little puck. Basically, what you're going to do is squeeze as much oil paint out of your brush and then get it a little bit wet. Use the brush on the puck of soap here and work the oil paint out. It rinses out with water. It is a lifesaver. It keeps your brushes looking really good. One time I was able to get my brush from phthalo blue to white. I'm not joking. This is also not an ad. You can get these things for like $8 at the art supply store. It's perfect. You should give it a go. Now I want to get into why I'm bringing the certain things that I am bringing. Normally, you wouldn't need to bring an art palette with you, but I love this one. I actually made this custom for my travel easel. It is super lightweight. It's acrylic, and I have a piece of foam board here on the back. It was once white, but now it is the lovely color of whatever painting I'm working on. I scrape it down so there's not a ton of texture, but it's also perfect for painting on. This thing is so light, but why I'm bringing this is kind of twofold. Yes, you could get a palette wherever you were when you're painting. I'm sure your art residency would actually provide one for you if you needed it, but I like it for traveling for this reason. To protect your brushes. What I like to do is I attach the brushes to the palette here. Normally I will get some saran wrap or some other kind of attachment device, a bag or something. But what it does, when I attach the brushes to the palette and then I lay the brushes flat like this, it protects the shape of the brushes. It protects the integrity of the brushes in a way that if they were loose and in a bag, they could get bent, they could get crushed. We don't want bent or crushed. We want handy, perfect brushes for our trip because they need to do a lot of work for us while we're away. Something I want you to think about is what colors you're bringing. When you're an oil painter, you probably have a million tubes of color. And I want you to be very conscious of what you're bringing. Paints are heavy. They're really heavy. And they're going to take up a lot of your allocated weight when you have a suitcase. I'm going to be bringing my favorite colors with me when I go on this trip, but things I always make sure I have is a big tube of white. Now, if you look at this one, it is mostly used up. There's not a whole lot left, so I will be bringing a new tube with me. I want to never run out of white paint. Although, honestly, if you have other people in your residency with you, they'll probably lend you some color if you need it. I'm also bringing my favorite black, which right now is chromatic black. How is that? These two colors are the only two colors that I'll bring that are this big of tubes. The rest I will go for a 32 milliliter tube like this Prussian blue here and hope for the best. I'm not going to give you my whole list of colors that I bring with me every time because it's going to change for what you like to make. If you're a landscape painter, you're going to bring a lot of earth tones. I'm an abstract geometric artist, and I like a lot of color. I like the most saturated, vivid color you've ever seen, so I'm going to bring quite a few of those. What I'm not going to do is bring my entire collection of colors with me, because that would be so heavy. I would have to check another bag, and that seems silly for a month-long trip. On this trip, I'm also bringing 3 palette knives. These are my favorites. I have 2 of the same size of this one. This is a number... Well, I had a number at one point. This is a number 30 spade palette knife, and can I get you to focus? I just love it. I have 2 of these, and they're my favorites, and then I have a skinnier version of the spade. In my pencil case, I have a variety of different pencils. I've got a 2H, I've got a 4B, I've got an eraser, I've got some pens. This one's almost out of ink, so I need to replace it before I go. A smudging tool, a couple of other colors, and this will be my sketching kit. My pen case, I know I had a couple pens in my other one, but this one is so important for me to have. This is for journaling primarily. I am big on journaling when I go on a trip such as this. I like to talk about my thoughts in the morning, talk about any revelations I've had. I now have a podcast, so I can talk about it there, but also it's nice just to have something personal. In my case, I have lots of colors. I've got highlighters and Sharpies and pens and fine liners. I love these, and this is my little case for that. One of the most important things you can bring with you on a trip like this is a sketchbook. Mine is from a recent trip to Florence, I believe. Yep, that's right. I'm actually most of the way through it. I might pick up a different sketchbook for this journey, so I have enough pages. And this is an 8x10. It's the smallest size I would bring for a journey like this. Think even bigger, maybe 9x12, maybe something else, because it's going to give you the room to sketch, because you don't know what you're going to run into while you're there. Maybe you're going to go to museums and study. Maybe you'll go around the lands of wherever your art residency is and see something really cool and want to sketch it. So bring a sketchbook with you. This one might be a little bit more unusual, but I always make sure I have a small stack of business cards. These are mine. They're nice and colorful. They have my website and my email address all written down there for you, and they're just nice to have. I'm also bringing a ruler with me. Yes, the art residency probably has a ruler, but because I do so many fine-lined work as sketches for my oil paintings, this is a must for me. For surfaces, I'm bringing oil-primed linen with me. I already mentioned before that I have a giant roll behind me, and I'm going to be cutting it down to size. My preferred sizes for painting are usually 30 by 30 inches, but for the sake of travel, I'm going to go 20 by 20 inches or smaller. This will make it easier for me to transport things back. It'll make it easier for me to move on from one idea to the next, so I'm not working on one painting the entirety of the trip. I did promise the residency that I would give them a painting before I departed, and that will be the last painting I work on. Something that is bigger, something that I don't have to worry about drying times with. It's going to be nice. I'm actually looking forward to it. When you're thinking about services for your residency, think about where you're going and if they have art supply stores there that you can buy services for. It might make shipping on the way back a little bit more expensive, but when you go into a residency, you are thinking about budgeting for shipping artwork home. At least I hope you are. You could be. Another thing that art residencies are good for is trying new supplies, new materials. It can be a great way to experiment and to get into a new kind of craft that you might not be used to before. However, it's also nice to have a plan. So instead of bringing my inks with me, I'm going to leave them at home. Instead of bringing my huge collection of Sharpies, I'm also going to leave those at home. I was considering on this trip having a moment for fountain ink because that is something I've been wanting to get into. But for this, I've decided to focus and leave it at home. When you're going on an art residency, it's important to focus on what you want to accomplish on this trip. Do you want to work on your oil paintings? Do you want to work on sketching? Do you want to work on writing? Do you want to work on something totally outside of your abilities? Having this focus will make it way easier for you to pack and also way easier for you to have a great time. Having a purpose and a mentality for when you're going and why you're going is superb for enjoying your residency experience. I'm super excited for this opportunity to go to France for a few weeks. I'm excited to get out of my home studio, which admittedly I love. Being in here every day brings me a lot of joy. I hope that this packing list has helped you figure out what you're going to pack for your trip to whatever art residency has let you in. Can't believe they finally let you in. I'm going to put the list of all the supplies I'll be bringing with me on my trip down in the description. And if you've enjoyed this or found it helpful, I would appreciate a thumbs up, a 5-star rating, or even a comment if you feel like it. Friends and foes, it's been good to see you. I hope you have a great day and make good choices. Bye!